The entire animal kingdom masturbates.
This isn't quite the Spartan mentality that Permat should have in his life.
What advice would you give to the guys?
Your job is to make sure you don't become food for anyone.
How do you abstain properly?
Masturbation is always a dopamine story.
So what's your goal? Relief.
To relieve their suffering.
Hello friends, have a great day and mood. Today my guest is Shakir Babaev, a person who leads a healthy lifestyle and has tried and experimented with many things himself. I invited you. By the way, where did you fly from? Kazan? Yes, he flew from Kazan to visit us and didn't refuse. I appreciate that. We had
a live broadcast.
In March, yes, in March. And you and I decided a long time ago that we should film because you have a young audience. Our audiences are different in age, and I really like that. You've been practicing the second thing for a long time because I read everything, what we call so-called Hormesis, and you practice a lot of it. Theory without practice means nothing. Why? Well, for example, imagine I'm a professor at an institute who teaches how to run a business. I'll be beating my chest, like many so-called experts on the internet do, and saying, I know everything better than anyone else. But imagine such a professor goes out, tries to start a business and faces things that completely contradict what he thought. That is, on paper, there are no bribes, no kickbacks, no breaking the law, a lot of things. None of what he explains and teaches on paper actually happens. And sometimes it's the opposite. And that's why the best combination is when you have both theory and practice. That's why it's very important to understand what's really happening on the ground. There are a lot of supplements that, according to the papers and articles, don't work, but I don't care what they say. If I feel it, if it helps me, if it says it helps with headaches, but it doesn't help me, why should I take it? Or, on the contrary, they say carnitine doesn't work, that you don't lose weight from it, but it helps me, I sweat more, I feel better during cardio, so I'll keep taking it. Contrary to what's written there, and there are a lot of such slippery things. So what makes a real scientist different from a fake scientist? Because a real scientist tries to get to the truth, not just confirm his own opinion. When you write a literature review, for example, I wrote one for my doctoral dissertation. Mine was in molecular genetics. I have a doctorate in oncology and radiation therapy. I don't have the goal of proving something. Before I start my research, I write a review where I look at what has happened over the past 10 years. And there's no such thing as this is the truth. It says that these people got this result. There's a huge contradiction, and you're searching for the truth. That is, on any topic, absolutely anyone I take will always find something opposite. And that's why I want to warn you against what many people unfortunately do and speculate about. When it's impossible to push science forward because it's very hard to come up with something new, you can't go back, but everyone wants hype, everyone wants attention. There's a saying, pushing science sideways. Many people do this to confirm their own views rather than seek the truth. I don't have that, and I hope you don't, which is why we're together. Today I asked you to talk with me about the topic of Hormesis. I won't lie, I actually heard the term Hormesis for the first time from David. I'm not really shy about admitting when I don't know something. If I don't know, I just say I don't know. My producer asks, why do you say that? Your expert videos outperform your podcasts and bring in more subscribers. I say it's because when I do a podcast, I learn. The more guests I have, the smarter I'll become. Imagine if I do podcasts for 10 years, just think of all the different people I'll meet.
A huge informational legacy.
Many useful things will remain. So let's discuss today what Hormesis actually is in your understanding and why a modern man needs it. First of all,
voiceover, I want to say that I'm happy to be here. I really am, because a year ago I couldn't even imagine that I would be sitting on your podcast. Even though a year ago you had a smaller audience on YouTube and social media, I'm still incredibly happy to be here. And I realize that this will lead to some realizations on my part, on the audience's part, and maybe on your part as well. I first heard about Hormesis from David. I didn't know there was such a word in Russian, and when I saw the definition of this word, I was like, oh, so that's what it's called. That's actually how it turned out. Stress that you have to experience yourself, not break under it for a short period of time, and after that you'll get big benefits. So, roughly speaking, stress is suffering. In this case, Hormesis. You put in a little effort, you suffer, and after that you get more benefits than you had before that Hormesis. And I think there are actually a lot of specifics here, Alexander, and there are different kinds of hormesis, meaning there are many levels, many stages. That's how I'll put it. An average person, for example, eats 5, 6, 7 times a day, counting all the snacks, because the body considers snacks as full meals, and so eating this often, they're not hardened at all. He gets sick several times a year and takes pills for headaches, stomach pain, and other issues. He also doesn't get much physical activity. So, we're talking about the most average person, not the healthiest from a physiological point of view, and when this person, let's say, hears about hormesis and cold showers, he decides to try taking a cold shower because he's read a lot of positive reviews about it. Overall, your brain functions better, your hormones become more anabolic, and your dopamine sensitivity increases. There are a lot of things, some people even start attributing fat burning to it, so he decides to try it. He takes a cold shower, gets sick, and realizes that it's all nonsense. And in reality, you can't skip steps that you haven't reached yet. Before taking a cold shower, you should at least try a contrast shower. What is a contrast shower? It's when you step into the shower or bathroom. Hot water, then cool, hot again, then cold. After you get used to this kind of hormesis, this temperature exposure in a few weeks or months, whenever you want, you switch from hot to cold, and you can repeat hot and cold again without using cool water. Gradually move forward by removing hot water and leaving only cold. Take it step by step. Hormesis isn't fully effective without a gradual approach.
People here like to do nothing all year, and then when the epiphany frosts come, suddenly jump into an ice hole, and then they come to us afterwards. Prostatitis, pyelonephritis, cystitis, pneumonia. I
heard a story a few years ago. My birthday is January 27, and on January 21 there was an incident in Mariel. I'm not sure how many years ago that was. The mother of her 2 kids, no, that's a different case where the woman didn't survive. I shouldn't have mentioned that case, it's emotional. And the mother of her 2 small children, a son and a daughter, or maybe 2 sons, they were about 4 or 5 years old, also made them go into the water and come out during the epiphany frost. And those children ended up in the hospital in serious condition with inflammation of several organs. Their tonsils were affected and their lungs as well. And after that I thought, damn, how did the mother feel about herself after all this? Well, I mean, the kids didn't follow any gradual process, right? They're just kids. Why would they need any gradual approach? They live, have fun, run around, and so on. And she threw the child, a person unprepared for icy water, and we see the consequences. The same will happen for most people since their immune system isn't at peak performance every day.
The more knowledge you have, the easier it is to get to the truth and not cause harm, because the main principle of medicine is to do no harm. And correct me if I'm wrong. Why do we need this? Modern people live in great comfort and are far from nature. We are basically like lions in a zoo. We don't hunt for our food, we don't defend our pride, we don't fight to avoid becoming a victim of hyenas, and as a result we have a fat lion in the zoo. What about us? In the end?
Remember the Upper Paleolithic when people chased antelopes with spears? That is, there was constant physical activity and your life depended on it. If, hypothetically, you hadn't chosen to run in the Upper Paleolithic or around that time to hunt, even though there was no real choice back then, you wouldn't survive, you'd burden your tribe and social circle, and you were expected to contribute. As soon as you woke up, you had to search for food. You had to actively feed not only your own stomach, but also the stomachs of your loved ones, and after that, your task was to make sure you didn't become food for anyone else.
Many patients ask, "Doctor, why am I sick? I seem to live a normal life. I don't drink, I don't smoke." I say, look, let's say we take away all the benefits of progress from you, your apartment, your warm clothes, and make you like a wild animal with no clothes on you at all. If we put you out on the street, you likely wouldn't survive the winter in your city. You'd need to live somewhere warm year-round. I really doubt that we used to be very hairy, and primates rarely live in those latitudes where there are constant severe frosts. We would just die. And that's why it's not just the lack of physical activity, but also where people live now in the far north. Or a sailor on a long voyage, on a business trip where you don't see the sun for 2 months during the polar night. And that's why let's take a look at the main things I wanted to discuss with you today. First, I really like the topic of standing on nails, and I'll explain why. Second, I like the topic about masturbation and abstinence, and the influence of hormonal balance on all of this. And the psyche. And probably one more thing I'd like to discuss is hardening, different methods of hardening. Let's start with sexual life, artificial, so to speak, masturbation, in other words, artificial sexual life. I searched for the most recent research from 2022-2023, so no one can claim I'm citing outdated studies. There are many new ones. A recent study included quite a lot of patients. This is from August 2023, specifically August 22nd, so it literally came out just a week ago. The study involved 448 people, and interestingly, all of them masturbated. This study also included people who had a certain degree of erectile dysfunction, meaning they had problems. Simply put, they had trouble performing. Because surprisingly, many people don't know what an erection during sex is, so they compared the pressure on the penis and how hard they actually masturbate. And what did they find? Those who later had problems in real life, this was largely because the amount of pressure they used was higher. So during masturbation, they simply put in more effort and get more physical stimulation. And because of this, they can't finish during regular sex. By the way, this is one of the complaints people come to me with. Many believe people see me just to last longer, but many actually come because they can't finish. So, ejaculation doesn't happen because there's not enough arousal, and their erection just goes away because the excitement fades and they can't finish, so they have to finish with their hand. Most of the time, they just use their hand. That's the only way they finish sex, exactly. Who overdoes it with masturbation? And you see, there's a direct connection. What do you think in your experience, since you also consult these guys? Masturbation is a vicious corrective dysfunction even when hormones are normal.
You said vicious masturbation?
Yes, they call it rough masturbation.
Yes, rough and tight when translated literally. And the thing is, there are many known cases when a man who practices tight masturbation, then during contact with a woman, at first he gets an erection, but then it starts to go down. With each passing minute, or let's say after a certain period of time, because the brain realizes that there isn't that same friction that we're used to getting when we're sexually aroused, meaning when there's some kind of sexual activity. And this is actually a problem that people don't pay attention to. Many will say, okay, then I just won't do it tightly, I'll do it the usual way. And actually, the problem won't go away here because we're only choosing one factor, specifically the intensity of the physical friction on the sexual organ. Masturbation. Every time people try to link testosterone to masturbation, they try to connect other topics that aren't directly related to masturbation. In reality, masturbation is always about dopamine. You're trying to get dopamine from life. And as we know, testosterone and dopamine are synergistic hormones. They always move up and down together. Most often, that's what happens. And when you seriously lower the sensitivity of all types of dopamine receptors because of masturbation, your testosterone drops along with it. And along with that, we get a feeling of dissatisfaction with life, a black and white perception of life itself. Talking to people isn't interesting enough. Food and water don't taste good enough. Achieving self-realization is tough, but how can you do it with low dopamine? I want to stress it's about dopamine, not testosterone. And masturbation is a topic that should be considered from the perspective of the dopaminergic system. If you don't do that, then what? There will be studies on intense masturbation, how it affects sexual intercourse, and so on.
To avoid oversimplifying or giving a crude explanation like saying everything happens because of masturbation or the penis, what role does dopamine play? There's an interesting study, it's also recent, from June 26, 2023, so it came out just recently, with 12,000 participants. In the study, the survey was mostly among Finns, and it included both men and women. They compared people who masturbate and those who don't, and whether they consider masturbation a problem, such as doing it too much or too often. And then they looked at their satisfaction with their sex life. And it's also interesting that they compared it with their past. Violence in the family, family problems, abuse, and a whole bunch of issues. So what did they find? That those who had a bad background, those who had a difficult childhood, who were bullied, picked on at school, pressured and suppressed, they masturbate more often and they have more problems. So it turns out that for many, this is really a way out, a way to get some pleasure. And many, say that their masturbation, let's say the angry kind, led to them becoming who they are now. But in reality, sometimes it's a consequence of having some psychological problems that you're trying to deal with. Well, I would say not really solve, but rather suppress. In other words, you sublimate. The study's conclusions are interesting.
It's a very interesting study. So the more issues there were in childhood or early adolescence, at 10 to 11 years old, the worse it was. His dopaminergic system is functioning, he may have most likely a lower number of dopamine receptors, or overall he will have less dopamine synthesis from iodine-containing hormones. And if we take a happy child who grew up in wonderful conditions with wonderful parents, in a wonderful school and so on, then the likelihood of him needing to masturbate will be very low. And on the contrary, if we take a person from the opposite system of our real life, then he will still try to get pleasure from life every time. After this hated school, coming home when there are no parents, quickly masturbate, or coming back from this stupid university class, masturbate as soon as possible. Relationships and sex don't work, so you masturbate as soon as possible, or you come back from this terrible job, and you can't fall asleep until you masturbate before bed. These are signs that a person is unhappy. You won't find a single happy normal addict, a fan of masturbation, or someone who drinks alcohol. Of course, you shouldn't take a radical position. It will always lead to being dishonest with yourself. And if we talk about masturbation as a drug addiction, since dopamine is a real drug, then I believe that people who have an unhappy life are more prone to this addiction.
A recent study, July 2023, also by David. Now, when I asked him about masturbation, many guys who come to me say, well, what's so bad about masturbation? Even in zoology, the whole animal world masturbates, but with primates, that's not the case. I never said that. They say, well, I saw dogs humping someone's leg and so on. And there's an interesting study called Masturbation in the Animal Kingdom by Adan Rang, and it states, based on, they tested it on ground squirrels and came to the conclusion that the main reason animals masturbate is actually not because they don't have a sexual partner. Sometimes it's due to overarousal. But they found out that for them, it's a way to improve the quality of the ejaculate. I'll explain why later, not right now, but I'll explain it later. And the second reason is that it's a way to prevent infection and congestion. So, in this way, males fight against developing prostatitis, because possibly the mechanism of so-called wet dreams is absent in them. Maybe this doesn't happen, but I suspect it does.
Who can do this, and how do rodents manage it?
I'll tell you which ones do it. African ground squirrels, rhesus macaques, and bonobos.
Bonobo.
Yes, they've seen it in some animals. What are your thoughts on masturbation in dogs, cats, and others? The reasons are likely different. We probably shouldn't compare them to humans, right? Yes.
Absolutely. Well, we can compare humans to primates, and probably to the primates that are most similar to us, like chimpanzees, and masturbation in primates. It's always the case when the individual is a male, let's take a male who doesn't have access to females, meaning he's not one of the dominant males in his group, and he's forced like a loser to engage in masturbation.
He doesn't have the opportunity to ejaculate naturally, and in order not to suffer from arousal, or as research has shown, to avoid getting sick, he's forced to masturbate.
Yes, a person doesn't have this issue, not the one I mentioned, but specifically removing viruses and infections. Because if you're a healthy man yourself, then your chances of getting any kind of prostate inflammation are generally minimized. It's all because of a terrible lifestyle and maybe some other anatomical diseases, but we often encounter that problem. Everyone who practices masturbation should probably admit it to themselves, at least in front of the mirror, at least once in their life. I'm not talking about everyone who masturbates, I'm talking about the majority of them. They do it simply because they don't have access to sex, and that's hopelessness. They say, I don't have a girlfriend or a relationship, so what should I do? Keep it all in, and for some reason, people believe holding semen inside for a while is bad, as if it could lead to some kind of intoxication or mental problems. On the contrary, masturbation leads to mental problems. Most people watch pornography during this act. Well, not everyone, but most. When you discussed this topic many times already, it was said, I won't talk about it again. The Coolidge effect, I think many people already understand this effect.
Saying it aloud, I recall that new things excite you more than the old and familiar. Yes, yes.
For every new sexual partner, your brain produces an even greater dose of dopamine. The more dopamine your brain releases, the lower the response to it. After contact, the sensitivity of dopamine receptors decreases, and there's a moment when you can't feel pleasure again after orgasm. This is called the refractory period, a brief pause that can last from 2 minutes to 2 days, depending on the person. So someone has sex, finishes, and then for a couple of days they absolutely don't want to or can't finish again, and this is an individual matter. But when we talk about pornography, masturbation, we always have to understand that in most cases pornography is closely related to this issue, and masturbation with pornography is probably one of the worst things a man or even a woman can do. Although women usually have lower dopamine sensitivity and higher prolactin, a dopamine antagonist, and so on, but still there's nothing good about women masturbating to pornography either, because it destroys your dopamine system, even for women.
I have something to add. There's an interesting study by Grosjev-Price. It's not very recent, but still relevant. It's from 2017. 7,648 men and 8,000 women took part in the study. What was the main focus of the research? I had couples, and I mentioned this topic because some of them, one of the reasons for arguments was that the woman was masturbating and her partner caught her masturbating after they had already had sex. He says, I left the house, came back home, opened the laptop, and there was an open page with pornography. He even described what kind, but that's not the point. Because of this, they had arguments. He checked the browser and saw that she does this regularly, sometimes even on days when they had sex. That day, it really hurt him. They went to a psychologist and a sexologist trying to figure out this problem. So, what is masturbation for men and what is masturbation for women? From our perspective, we see that a woman masturbates when she feels like something is missing, while we do it when we want pleasure. And this study, as you can see on a fairly large number of people, showed that masturbation is a bit different for us. According to this research, men who are not satisfied with their sex life are the ones who masturbate. So, the worse your sex life is, like if you have a partner you don't like, or there are some problems, or you don't have a partner at all, the more often and more you masturbate. And for us, this is augmentation, meaning substitution. So you're not getting enough and you take it from there. So this is a compensatory mechanism, but research has shown that for women, it's not exactly compensatory, it's complementary. So for them, it's like a dessert, meaning they actually treat it a bit differently. They can have a perfect sex life, be completely satisfied, and have a wonderful sexual partner. Well, it's like there's sex and maybe masturbation, but they don't have that connection where the worse their sex life is, the more they masturbate. So for them, it's more of a habit and more like an addition. I think it's also important to understand this because there are couples like the example I gave who really argue about it because we see it from our own perspective. So it means I don't satisfy her and she's missing something with me. For women, it's different. They see it as a small indulgence, not just easy pleasure. That's how I see it. I'm not here to prove anything today, just to share scientific information.
Well, what you're describing and what has been proven in this study, this person wants to chase dopamine, also because there are issues with dopamine, and they try to connect everything to dopamine. It might seem that way, but when we discuss the topic of masturbation, it's always closely connected to dopamine. And in general, women have fewer dopamine receptors. Women in general produce less dopamine because women have less testosterone, which is a dopamine synergist, and more prolactin, which is a dopamine antagonist. And in this case, when both a man and a woman do the same thing to get the same pleasure, sex, half an hour of sex, they end up experiencing it differently.
Some subscribers were offended when I mentioned half an hour. People wonder if 3 or 2 minutes is normal, but it really varies for everyone, ha ha ha.
Come on, honestly. Then let's say 26 seconds of sex, and everyone gets different pleasure from the process. A man will be satisfied on one level, a woman on another. Women typically have less dopamine, and their dopaminergic system is less strong, effective, and efficient than in men. But in the modern world, there's a big problem. Men have less testosterone, less dopamine, and more prolactin. This is a trend that has been observed for about 60-70 years, and in this case, we have no way out. With each generation, we see men who resemble women not only in appearance. We know that appearance is a consequence of hormonal balance and lifestyle, but also in fact men who are hormonally similar to women. When a man has testosterone levels of 9 or 10 nanomoles, what's normal for a woman? About 3 nanomoles.
Their levels differ greatly, and men lack a clear standard. They're currently using pigs as a reference, which is controversial, so I'll stay silent to avoid criticism.
Well, about the fact that a woman tries to catch up with that pleasure like a dessert after a full sexual act? This means that she simply has a problem with dopamine compared to a healthy person. There are women with a well-functioning dopamine system. And these are women who don't want to masturbate after sex. These are women who don't want to chase after sugary desserts after a good meal. These are women who prefer protein, fat, fiber foods over carbohydrates, meaning they want to eat fewer carbs and more proteins, fats, and fiber, and so on. This applies to any area of life. If someone has dopamine issues, then after a full sexual act, which men don't typically experience after sex, I know we have a lot of viewers who after sex also masturbate afterward, and of course most likely their partner doesn't know about it. I don't think this can be a one-sided game.
I read a study saying that as exams get closer and you prepare more, this empty masturbation happens more often. It's a way to relieve stress. By the way, there's an interesting study from 2019 by Piotr Zimski that actually shows a connection with the amount of pornography used. When we talk about pornography, most of the time it's unlikely that someone just sits and watches, contemplates and says, "What a nice picture, how well the lighting is set up." Usually when we talk about pornography, we mean masturbation, and he says yes. There are many conflicting studies that say masturbation with the use of pornography eventually leads to prolonged sexual intercourse in a negative sense of the word. That is, your level of arousal towards a real partner decreases, it becomes harder for you to ejaculate, and as a result, sometimes erectile dysfunction can also occur. As a doctor, I can explain why. The level of stimulation you get, including the fact that you are rougher, you can't squeeze with the vagina the way you can with your hand. For example, because your imagination has already taken you far away, and your partner just doesn't arouse you anymore. Because you've worn out your dopamine system, you can develop erectile dysfunction, since this just doesn't arouse you anymore. Why does a second sexual act sometimes help, by the way? People say, I used to be able to do it 2 or 3 times, now my revolver has turned into a musket. I ask, what should I do? Ultimately, they say they take medications for potency, and it works the second time. But why does it work? Because he needs less arousal to have a second sexual act. Because this soft erection that he gets from the medication is already firm, and that's why it works the second time. And that's why this study shows that, yes, it's possible. I mean, it's possible, but definitely. They say that there is a connection between pornography use and decreased satisfaction with sexual life. Masturbation involves many variables, making it hard to form an equivalent group. Yes, to compare things, but for those who masturbate, masturbation is directly linked to pornography. The more they do it, the less satisfied they are with their sex life. Maybe it's because, though they've seen a lot, they're not satisfied and may stop making love to their spouses with real affection. They skip foreplay there since people are used to quickly getting intimate without effort, explanation, or adjusting to each other. And sometimes they move away from it because they use it, as I said, just to relieve stress. What do you think about that? You talk to young guys, really young ones. My audience is a bit older than yours, but you talk to those who have just recently, let's say, had their sexual debut. How often do you see guys, especially those with delayed debuts, who seem fine but actually have sex problems due to masturbation?
What role does pornography play in a young man's life? Most people, and this applies to both guys and girls, start masturbating for the first time in their lives. If it's the era of the internet, then of course this is also accompanied by watching porn. Which genre is probably the most harmless? Well, that's the classic, man and woman, just regular sex, but then this person's dopamine system gets used to that genre, and it doesn't really do much for him anymore. I'll repeat, last time he got a lot of pleasure from it, but now he can't get that pleasure anymore. It doesn't excite him enough. He doesn't want to orgasm to it. And he starts looking for new genres, and it could be group stuff or something else. There are a lot of genres. I won't list them all. There are a lot of them, and each one, depending on a person's sensitivity, becomes something new. Before I had just one genre or those actors, now I have these. And so you keep scrolling and scrolling every year looking for new porn genres just to experience that long-awaited orgasm. But in real life, well, you get to some genre like zoophilia or bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, sadism and masochism or group sex or something else. And in real life, it's unlikely you'll be able to get the same thing you see on your computer or phone screen. When you've been masturbating for the past few years and then you don't get that during a real sexual act with a woman, it just gets lost. You can't get as aroused as you did when you were masturbating to porn, because there, more sophisticated things are happening and your brain produces more dopamine for something forbidden, unknown, or new. But in real life, you have regular sex, and of course that doesn't satisfy you. If we remove porn from a person's life, whether it's a woman or a man, then within a few weeks, the pleasure from sex becomes much higher, and the person starts to realize, damn, having sex is much better than masturbating because here there's real contact. Everyone knows about the hormone oxytocin, the neurotransmitter, the hormone oxytocin.
By the way, it's because of it that you want to hug your girlfriend?
If it weren't for oxytocin, we wouldn't be friends with anyone. We'd all be fighting each other. It's a kind of social, interpersonal glue. And by the way, when a person interacts with a dog, oxytocin is also produced.
By the way, it's released in huge amounts during childbirth?
Yes, a super huge amount. It also starts to increase prolactin. So oxytocin, let's put it this way, what's the difference between sex and masturbation? You know, for our brain, what's the difference between sex and masturbation? What's the difference for the brain?
But I think sex is about reproduction while masturbation is about getting satisfaction.
How does it tell them apart?
Well, that's the thing. Most likely it doesn't really distinguish them at all. Maybe only by what causes arousal, by the stimuli. And if we're having sex, we get aroused by a real live partner. If we're having sex, the brain doesn't understand that there's a partner in front of us. It understands that it's a computer, so to speak. And because of that, if you have more pornography in your life, you start getting more aroused by, let's say, the laptop. And that doesn't mean that the same woman in real life will arouse you. You'll be more aroused by the computer. You get used to it because you get pleasure sitting at the table in front of your laptop, and that's what arouses you. Because of this, you start having problems in your real sex life.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And there are just 3 factors by which the brain understands that this isn't sex, but some kind of sexual activity: the lack of movement in the hip joints and the absence of another person's scent. We're not talking about pheromones, it's 50-50. The scientific community is divided on whether humans have pheromones or not. But let's say...
By the way, we have a podcast. Have you seen it? A proven pheromone is the one released by infants, hexadecanal, which reduces sex hormones in men by 30% and suppresses sexual behavior by 30%, but in women, it's the opposite. These are mothers. I'm an aggressive mother, and for them, it's the opposite, meaning they become more aggressive. This is a proven pheromone, meaning all the effects of the pheromone. It's called hex, and the question is, well, if there is something proven to affect behavior and hormone levels, prolactin increases, testosterone decreases, you want sex less, this milky smell from a baby, that's exactly what hex is.
Yes.
I believe that pheromones exist.
Me too. I read 2 big books about the sense of smell, and both of them said the same thing. Some people say they exist, some people say they don't. Here are some arguments for one side, and here are some for the other. All right, the lack of movement in the hip joints, the lack of it, we can imitate that, but how do you imitate a person's smell? That's the second thing.
Let's say we put some things nearby.
And the third factor is the lack of tactile sensations from another person. That is, only you touch yourself and you only feel yourself. That's it, there's no one else.
How do you overcome it? You take someone else's underwear, sit on your left hand until you can't feel it, and start moving your hips while masturbating.
That would be hilarious. Well, yes, we can trick this system. And the brain understands considering these 3 factors, or their absence. It's not sex, but a sexual activity, and when the body realizes it's not sex with a person, it doesn't produce oxytocin. Oxytocin is released during sexual activity and after orgasm. I don't know, you can look up these studies, they're all in English. Oxytocin during orgasm allows less prolactin to be produced, and it also prevents testosterone from dropping too much. And as a result, after sex, you feel better.
And after masturbation, you feel drained?
Yes, because no oxytocin was released, and after masturbating, prolactin rose and testosterone fell significantly.
Let's look at the science. A 2021 large-scale randomized study with many participants. Murat Schumann, what did he show? He compared testosterone concentrations. He compared concentrations of prolactin, free testosterone, and cortisol. And interestingly, in his study, he said that free testosterone might decrease, but he showed that the circadian rhythm of hormone production definitely changes. We have hormone levels that vary throughout the day, like testosterone, which is higher in the morning and drops by evening, so that your testicles, among other things, can recover a bit, meaning the load is regulated, and during orgasm and ejaculation, this process is affected. It's just that when we talk about ejaculation and orgasm, we're saying that something simply came out, that we ejaculate. Guys say, what's the big deal? It's just that the stagnation came out? I guess we should probably explain that this is basically the idea behind abstinence, that we're playing with hormones. When we abstain, our testosterone generally increases because of this, and when we ejaculate, research shows mixed results, with free testosterone levels sometimes dropping and sometimes increasing, like a seesaw. So your prolactin increases to a certain level and your testosterone decreases. But there's an interesting thing about prolactin. Prolactin is responsible for how many luteinizing hormone receptors you have. And if you have very little prolactin, you'll feel luteinizing hormone less later on. Remember, you sent your test results and asked why they're not extremely low or what would happen if you lowered them further. If you lower it to 0 and maintain it there with the same luteinizing hormone levels, you'll gradually make less testosterone. That's why when guys take your interview or mine out of context and think the more Dostinex I take, the lower my prolactin will be, the better. And then they're surprised why at first the testosterone went up, but after a month or a month and a half in this mode, it starts to drop. That's why you need to listen to everything in context, not just take 10 seconds out, remove all the background, and draw conclusions. So, what do you think about this study, and what, in your opinion, happens when a person, well, what's the difference in your view between ejaculation during regular intercourse and during masturbation in terms of hormonal background?
During sex, your body releases oxytocin because you trust your partner. You don't have sex with people you don't trust. Compare the feelings after sex with a prostitute to sex with a woman you trust, and also compare both to masturbation.
Did you just suggest a clean study design?
Yes, of course.
Can you imagine something like that coming out of Russia?
I'll try to do it.
3 groups, prostitutes, favorites,
And also masturbation.
and masturbators.
And the thing is, the feelings and emotional states after sex with a prostitute are almost the same as after masturbation, meaning emptiness and incomplete satisfaction. But what are the feelings after sex with a beloved woman? They're extremely pleasant, and you're even ready to go out and meet people afterwards. You don't always just want to lie down, eat carbs, and sleep. Sometimes you do, but not always. After masturbation, you feel empty. Sex with an untrusted prostitute doesn't release oxytocin. The feelings are very similar to what I just described. And of course, when you have sex with a woman, you need to trust her, because before having sex, you had some communication, getting to know each other, spending time together, and so on. You do this with those you trust, not with those you fear. During sex, oxytocin is released, which after orgasm prevents prolactin from rising too much and keeps dopamine and testosterone levels stable. As a result, you feel fine, everything is good, it was a complete pleasant sexual experience, that's all. But many people, by the way, at 16, 15, 17 or 18 years old, when their dopamine system's recovery ability is very high, think that after orgasm from masturbation, everything is fine, everything is okay. If I felt good after masturbating at 16 and now at 18 still feel good with no sluggishness or dullness, it must always be this way. Maybe for a few minutes, but then I'm fine and ready for training. And as you get older, this feeling starts to fade because the body's ability to recover also decreases. Especially when you don't make sure your health is in good condition and when you engage in destructive behavior. Drinking every weekend, low levels of physical activity, a sedentary lifestyle, disrupted sleep patterns, masturbation, and so on. There are also problems with nutrition. Then, of course, your body's ability to recover and its overall reserves and resources will be depleted much sooner than they should be. That's why at 26 or 27, some guys look half dead.
Do you think masturbation and prostate cancer are linked? I'll share my thoughts, but I'd like to hear your opinion first.
As an oncologist, your opinion would be especially valuable here. I believe that if you ask me what is more likely to lead to prostate cancer, proper abstinence, specifically proper abstinence or masturbation, I would say masturbation has a higher chance.
Friends, today we've touched on a lot of interesting topics and we'll cover even more about sports, medicine and science. And if you're interested in all these topics and areas, there's a link under this video to my free webinar where we talk about testosterone and everything related to it. Click the link and register. It's completely free. There, I also present to you my project Fitness as Science about body transformation, nutrition, a healthy lifestyle, changing priorities, and moving in the right direction. So click the link below this video and join absolutely free. We all associate prostate cancer with testosterone because where does this idea even come from? When someone developed prostate cancer, they used to have their testicles removed. Why? Testosterone is seen as fueling cancer, yet cancer usually develops when testosterone is low. When testosterone is removed for about 2 to 2.5 years, the cancer typically stops growing, cells stop multiplying, tumor markers drop, but after 2 years it mutates and grows again, even without testosterone. So the mechanism that caused it in the first place, when we make it worse, the process continues further. And because these people have their testosterone removed, nowadays they don't remove the testicles, they give an injection that shuts down the testicles, and the testosterone level becomes almost castration level. People often blame testosterone for prostate cancer, but that's not actually true. According to the data, first of all, the higher your testosterone level is within the physiological norm, the lower the chance that this will lead to tissue degeneration and the development of cancer. Excluding hereditary cases, since this disease is inherited, having 2 second-degree relatives with prostate cancer indicates a genetic factor. It's possible. Second, a high level of testosterone. Most often this means a better, higher quality sex life, a stronger sexual constitution, possibly less subcutaneous fat, a healthier body, and more frequent sex as a result. And interestingly, in people. So we conducted a study, we took about 100 people and looked at what testosterone levels they had. Both groups can develop cancer, but those who developed cancer in a state of deficiency. So at the time of diagnosis, we saw that 50 people had low testosterone levels, and the other 50 who also had cancer had normal or high levels. But for those with low levels, we don't just look at cancer itself, we also look at the degree of malignancy. And the degree of malignancy, aggressiveness, that is, the tendency to metastasize, to progress, to recur, it was significantly higher in those who had low testosterone, among those who developed cancer, compared to those with higher testosterone levels. First, it's less aggressive there, and second, you have more options with various therapies available. It won't respond as well to testosterone since levels are already low, and blocking it won't have the same effect as in the second group.
Sorry, I got a little mixed up. Low testosterone is more malignant.
Those with low levels stop responding to drug therapy faster because their levels are already low and the cancer is aggressive. Because the body is used to low testosterone and it's only reduced by 30%, the effect is small. For instance, dropping testosterone from 25 nanomoles to 0 stops cancer growth more effectively than reducing it from 6 nanomoles. So indeed, men's health, a healthy man, also means risks for a number of oncological diseases, including for women. By the way, even though our channel is about men, most of the women we have with cancer, for example, uterine cancer, are overweight. They're very overweight and obese. In other words, these are people with endocrine disorders. So, when we talk about health and promote a healthy lifestyle, working out, eating right, we're saying that your hormones should be normal. People take things out of context and claim we only mean testosterone. Since I sell it, when this broadcast ends, I'll offer you more. We're saying that your testosterone should be normal at any cost. And if you can't achieve that through diet, through health, or anything else, you need to fix it. If you must choose between living with very low levels or using hormone replacement therapy to reach good levels, hormone replacement therapy is definitely the better option. What do you think? Do people even understand what low testosterone leads to?
No, they don't get it since it's normal now. Like Alexander, they may realize the drawbacks of low testosterone. And I always add with low dopamine system efficiency because it always goes together if it gradually became the norm. Unfortunately, I see more and more young guys everywhere. School students, college students, you can tell that their testosterone is at the lowest levels, and you can see that they wear out their dopamine system hard every day. And overall, they have low satisfaction with their lives, but people often don't understand where the problem comes from, and they try to fight the consequences when they should be fighting the root cause. And if you're trying to quit, for example, masturbation, but you can't, then you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this in the first place, and what do I need to do to stop wanting to do it every day? And when you address that root cause, it becomes much easier to fight. Life is always a struggle. Those who say you shouldn't fight anything in life, you should just accept. That's always 1,000 times harder, and only a wise, experienced person can do that, someone who has already fought their battles in the past. As you get to know yourself in this life, you continue to grow each year. Of course, you need to be able to resist your weaknesses, not accept them. You have to resist them for the sake of your strengths. You realize that you're doing well in sports, but masturbation makes you less happy, and you recover more slowly after your tough workouts. In that case, by abstaining from this act, you need to spend more time on physical activity. You should arrive earlier at the place where you need to train, and you should be the last one to leave. And in this way, some people call it sublimation, others call it fighting addiction.
There's an interesting study. Here's another one, quite recent, June 2023 also. The connection between sexual satisfaction in masturbation, and it states that masturbation in the animal world also again leads to improved sperm quality. Let's come back to this again later. I would like to get to Darwin's theory, and I also found an interesting text about sex, but before that I'll mention an interesting observation. Post-orgasmic syndrome is painful. I've met patients who experience severe pain after ejaculation, meaning that after they ejaculated they had intense pain that was relieved by analgesics. They would start having cramps, feel unwell, get nauseous, some would even vomit, and it felt like they had severe intoxication, so I Googled it. Post-orgasmic illness syndrome exists and symptoms can last up to 7 days. Can you imagine you masturbate and then for 7 days you're just down with the flu, with a fever, end up in the hospital, then you masturbate again and it's like in a cartoon again? So you just got discharged, couldn't resist, and it's funny, but still. Can you imagine the interesting aspects of masturbation? Scientists still don't know why it happens, so they only treat the symptoms. Regarding masturbation, I'll read, masturbation occurs throughout the entire animal kingdom. However, at first glance, the health benefits of such self-directed behavior are not clear. Despite this, several drivers have been proposed. Why did masturbation arise in the first place? Non-functional hypotheses claim that masturbation is either a pathology or a byproduct of high baseline sexual arousal, while functional hypotheses argue for an adaptive advantage. That is, in the animal world, it actually brings some benefits. We've already mentioned one, which is flushing out stagnation, everything that's there. The post-copulatory selection hypothesis claims that masturbation increases the chances of fertilization, while the pathogen avoidance hypothesis claims that masturbation helps reduce host infection by flushing pathogens out of the reproductive tract. I found an article confirming that the quality of your ejaculate, since we're used to abstaining for 3 days before conception, there is a theory of short abstinence which says that if ejaculation happens after 4 to 5 hours of abstinence, the quality of the genetic material in the ejaculate will be higher because the sperm you get in the ejaculate will contain fewer sperm with fragmented DNA. In other words, it will be of better quality. In the animal world, where selection is a real struggle, why is that? Because one female mates with 2, 3, or even 4 partners, especially among birds and sometimes among certain monkeys. Among mammals, we compete for the female, so to speak, before mating. And in our animal world, in the human world, it's not like she has sex with 5 partners. And whoever has the better sperm becomes the father. And in the animal world, especially among those animals that are often used as examples, like, excuse me, they masturbate, there's competition between males, that's one thing, whoever overcomes her. Second, then it goes on inside the vagina, where the sperm is more active and superior. That's why, according to this theory, it's very important for your genetic material to be superior, so that it can get through the cervical mucus. And the third factor in the competition is that they don't have sex for years like we do, and since they try to have children, they need to do it as quickly as possible here and now. Also, the egg itself can, in a way, choose which sperm is better. So there are actually a lot more selection factors there, and that's why, really, comparing animals, well, it makes sense. I think after everything that's been said, animals and humans, people say since they masturbate, we can too, but that's not right. They have their reasons, so what's ours? Today the neighbor came over, just dropped by, and who's the father? Well, probably not. We talked today about many interesting articles on masturbation.
To put it simply, we agree life is better without masturbation than with it.
I'll say this, the less of it, the better. The less pornography, the better your testosterone. And depression, August 2023. It's considered that depression isn't a disease in our country, but in many developed countries, people even take sick leave for it. So if a doctor officially diagnoses you with depression, first of all, they can prescribe you medication. And by the way, this is the most common group of medications that are now being prescribed in huge quantities, for example, in the United States of America. The amount is just insane. And you can skip work and be on sick leave while you have depression. And there's always a debate here. Can depression lead to a decrease in hormone levels? Studies say yes, for example, Valerie Lance's research. It's recent, but then the question arises, it's like the chicken and the egg. The eternal debate, what led to your low testosterone, your depression, or maybe low testosterone caused your depression? It's all connected. Did weight gain cause low testosterone, or did low testosterone lead to weight gain? So they influence each other, and sometimes there's nothing primary. There's always a connection that you need to understand. What if you just sit around feeling sad, my girlfriend left me, I haven't achieved anything in life, everything is bad, bad, bad? Your testosterone will decrease, making you sad, gain weight, and have erectile issues. That's why your emotional state matters. Why discuss this? It's important to go to jiu-jitsu, to work out, to go hiking with the guys sometimes, to socialize in the right circle. When you're feeling bad, don't lock yourself up at home. Surround yourself with the right people, do the right things, watch positive movies, and listen to good music. And does it work the other way around, in your opinion, based on your experience communicating with young people? Does their environment impact testosterone levels?
If you're surrounded by people who constantly want to live for these quick, small pleasures, then you'll most likely end up doing the same things they do. We're social primates, so we can't change it. And there's this saying, if you're surrounded by 3 millionaires, you'll soon become the 4th. If you're surrounded by 3 criminals, you'll soon become the 4th, and so on. Of course, there's a reasonable question. Why would those 3 millionaires need you? And so on. But if we focus on this phrase and its meaning, then of course the point is that our environment, our surroundings, have a strong influence on us. There's nothing we can do about it. And a person's very first environment is their family.
Right? Research, by the way, shows that when we have a testosterone deficiency, in addition to depression, we also experience insomnia. Our cognitive function suffers. In other words, we start to get dull, and our memory gets worse. Receiving testosterone, even conditionally, will help you feel better by addressing the root cause. Very often on the internet, I see videos from many doctors who deal with, among other things, hormone replacement therapy, where they say, a person came to see me. He took antidepressants for 3-4 years and I cured him. And I know what I often encounter is that people draw a cause and effect relationship. That if testosterone helped, if I started feeling better on testosterone, especially on hormone replacement therapy, then the reason for my problem must be that I have low testosterone. The real reason could be depression, which also caused your testosterone to drop. When you restore it, you feel better and people stop taking antidepressants. Sometimes depression is caused by hypogonadism. But the studies, not just the one I read last night, I found no direct correlation. So no one knows exactly how much, where, or why. Have you met any doctors like that? First of all, those who say that everything is just about testosterone, which, by the way, people often accuse me of, that I put everyone on testosterone. Although actually only about 3 or maybe 4% of my patients are on testosterone replacement therapy. And secondly, what I'm interested in is, do you think that if testosterone helped you, it means you were deficient in it? Because, you know, we often come across that situation. I'm sure you've also seen cases where one problem is covered up by another, meaning you actually have a deeper issue, but it's being addressed with super high doses of testosterone. And why do so many guys, when they're depressed, start working out, go to the gym and feel better, and then start a cycle? And many of the guys I competed with, and myself too, by the way, started competing during a period in life when I was feeling really, really bad. That was my way to escape. What do you think about treating depression with testosterone?
I haven't seen doctors like that, but I've heard that Grekov does that. Is that true or not?
Zhenyok will watch this video. Honestly, I'll say Zhenya is a really good guy, and in real life, he's actually completely different. The only thing is, sometimes he can be too harsh, of course. We often disagree on many things. I handle inviting guests to the podcast. Everyone assumes that if someone tells me I have high testosterone, I can drink, smoke, and party. I don't drink or smoke, and if a guest says that, it's their opinion. I invite experts to share their views and avoid arguing, since I don't like to argue. That's why you shouldn't assume it's unusual if I don't agree with you at all or just disagree. It's normal for you to say things I disagree with. You said some things and I'll stay quiet, but that doesn't mean I agree with everything. You have to consider that because the guys watching like to take things out of context, especially if you say something and I stay quiet. We provide information, scientific references and our opinion, but you draw your own conclusions. About Jenny, do you know the main complaint about him? Why he looks unathletic? It's mostly his genetics. And a lot of people write, yeah, he needs testosterone. Jenny is on testosterone replacement therapy. He's been on testosterone replacement therapy for many years, and he doesn't hide it. He has very high testosterone. Jenny is probably a vivid, he doesn't hide it himself. He's a vivid example that just having high testosterone can't solve a lot of problems. That's why proper nutrition is crucial. And genetics, bad habits, and daily routine all play major roles. He works non-stop from 7 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. like a madman. I even scold him for it. Who wouldn't care? Delegate a third of your patients. Start going to the gym, since people judge by appearance and not everyone notices how hard you work to help others. And also, like I said, you need to be less harsh. You can't be like that. And for example, that same Klamid, that unfortunate guy, in our last conversation, I can show you who it was with. My phone is around here somewhere. Well, with Zhenya, he posts videos, for example, about Klamid, saying that Klamid is absolutely not allowed. Yeah, honestly, I write to him like Zhenyok, like, hey, who prescribed it and how much? He says they prescribed a full tablet, which is a lot. I write to him that, of course, it's a lot, but I honestly tell him myself that I give a quarter. You see, yeah, I say that I can give a quarter of a tablet, and for me, in my practice, taking a quarter every other day is the dose you can stay on if it resolves hypogonadism. But I'm against people being pumped with huge doses of clomiphene, or when secondary hypogonadism is treated with testosterone, that is, when you still have resources. But everyone loves to take things out of context and think that Zhenya and I, here he is for example, he posts a story saying it's absolutely forbidden and I prescribe it and get criticized for it. I completely understand that there are doctors who will hate me for this and there are doctors who won't like me because of it. Yes. So everything is ambiguous and you need to understand that people don't like to listen in context. If someone watches your video or I discuss health, they'll focus on some small detail. Yeah, I have 70 videos too about testosterone and people say that's all I talk about. I mean, are they idiots or what? Seriously, come on.
As I said before the podcast, I released a video focused only on space physics.
And what did you say there?
I said that the speed of light is limited by the speed of light, the light from the sun. The photons from the sun reach us in almost 9 minutes, that is 8 minutes and 20 seconds. And the reason why we most likely will never see aliens is that when we look through telescopes at distant stars that are millions, tens, or even hundreds of millions of light years away from us, the light from them reaches us at this moment because they are at such a great distance, and a photon, light, is limited by its speed, the speed of light, meaning there is nothing faster than that. I'm not saying anything about wormholes and so on, that's all just theory for now, but the light we see from these stars at this moment, it was a long time ago. Yes, it was super long ago, that kind of long ago. It depends on how far away it is from us, because while the photon is traveling from them to us, we only see it now.
We don't have any rum here. This is London's.
If they're flying?
This one is flying there, and the distance between them gives us something.
These are two cars. After all, the speed of light is a unit of measurement that doesn't change. It's stable. It's always the same. It's not as if two photons are just moving apart.
Then that's a bit tricky, yeah.
There's no such thing as adding the speed of light to itself. So, what am I saying? Before the podcast, I mentioned how many flat earthers messaged me about this.
That yes, that the Earth is flat?
Well, it exists, right?
Science says everything is there. The Earth is flat. And why are you trying to prove this to them?
I'm not proving anything to them, and there are a lot of these comments. I see that people even say that, and some people say that they've personally seen aliens and they see them every day, and I'm just going crazy. There aren't 50 or 150 of these comments. There are about 1,000, and well, the video got more than 1.5 million views, and you can read all kinds of comments there. So no matter what you say, no matter when you say it or what topic it's about, there will always be people who completely disagree with you.
And that's normal. You have to treat it normally. And you shouldn't. People ask me, what did you say there? Aren't you going to film something there? First, I don't care or even pay attention. And second, it's normal for people to have different opinions. I don't need to prove theirs is wrong if mine differs. I do what I do, my job. By the way, look, here's a study exactly on Darwin's topic. You see 4 types of competition. You see intersexual types of selection. And from nature, we have the classic female choice, meaning the classic way a woman chooses her partner, so she selects. Of the 4 in the wild, only the first remains, male-male battles. That's just a convention. We don't actually do it where the winner takes her by the hand and leaves.
Back in the Upper Paleolithic, if we go through those times.
During copulation, well, I mean during sexual intercourse. Sperm competition refers to competing sperm quality. First,
yes,
which we also don't have, you know, it's like give me 10 jars of the best sperm, make a cocktail, and then the strongest one wins. Classic female choice exists and cryptic female choice likely does too, but we have a major problem. I would say that most likely even this doesn't exist anymore because now the average time to get pregnant is dozens of times longer than it used to be. Has anyone ever bred dogs? You bring, well, a dog and they say, here, please, here's our male, here's your female. They, let's say, have sex, everything happens right away, and puppies are born practically after the first or second mating. Now it's considered that turning to assisted reproductive technology is assisted reproductive technology. That's in vitro fertilization, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, insemination. Only after a year, though some say you should try for 2. Imagine trying for 2 years in the wild. The species would go extinct. That's just in zoos. In the wild, it's much simpler. And that's why when the egg is supposedly choosing something, that's already something out of science fiction. Right now, the main thing is just for conception to happen. Stories about people accidentally getting pregnant are much less common now. These days, it takes a lot of effort to conceive. So now you see depression and hypogonadism are closely linked.
Well, again, depression probably isn't as strongly connected to testosterone as it is to dopamine. I think that the hormones, or rather the neurotransmitters responsible for life satisfaction, are directly linked to depressive states, not our anabolic hormones.
Sperm DNA fragmentation increases with age and the quality of sperm decreases. We're used to thinking that the older a man gets, the more like wine he becomes. But actually, he's not like wine. Over the years, he slowly turns into vinegar. And yes, a man at 60 or 70 is still a man, but he's not as appealing as that wine from our analogy. The older a man gets, the worse the quality of his sperm becomes, even if the quantity stays the same. Fragmentation increases with age. What affects this? Research shows that besides sex hormone levels and genetics, your lifestyle, your environment, and other factors have a big impact. Well, how you eat, whether you smoke or not, whether you go to the sauna or bathhouse, whether you lead a healthy lifestyle, all of this has an impact. That's why when we say that if you want to have healthy children, if you want to be fertile, you need to exercise, you need to take proper care of yourself, not just, we have a barrier there, the so-called hematotesticular barrier. We have several barriers. The hematoplacental barrier, which is between the blood and the placenta. The hematotesticular barrier, between your blood and your testicles. And there's also the blood-brain barrier. These barriers let things through with great difficulty. That's why a lot of medications don't reach the brain, don't pass through the placenta. And that's also why, for example, a testicular injury, if someone damages your testicle. And that's why in those videos where guys hit each other in the groin, like in those jackass type videos, if this leads to the rupture of one testicle, anti-sperm antibodies are released, meaning your immune system starts destroying your testicle, and possibly the other one might shrink as well. So, when there's major trauma with blood contact, testicles are typically removed, even though they could be stitched because of the exposure. Because your genetic material, well, let's say it's not a complete set of your genes, is contained there, since sperm cells contain half of your genetic set. Do you know what I'm getting at? Nothing gets in there, and we're all used to thinking that it's very hard to harm any of this, and that a sperm cell is just a sperm cell. It's all simple. What do you think, in percentage terms, how much does lifestyle contribute to sperm quality?
I think 90.
Yeah, I think so too. The higher this number is, the more I think a man will pay attention to himself. Interesting, can I tell you a story? I had a guy come in for a consultation and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. We even thought his wife was poisoning him. They wanted kids, but things weren't working out. And his sperm analysis was normal. And nothing, we tried everything. Chlamydia tests, HCG, Ovitrel, you name it. Nothing worked. 6 months, still nothing. And you know what happened in the end? He installed a sauna at home and used it daily. Classic. Yeah, by the way, that's actually a form of contraception. So guys who regularly go to the sauna can really become infertile. Temporarily, of course. Until he stopped, there was nothing, no living thing.
I recently read some scientific papers about our balls. And there was one study where they put a laptop on their lap, a working laptop, and you worked with it, well, just to put the laptop.
It's hot?
It's hot, and keeping it on your lap means bringing your legs closer together, which also raises gonad temperature. And with every 11 minutes, the temperature in your balls increased by 1 degree when the laptop was on your lap, and of course, every time your temperature goes up by a degree, active sperm count in your balls drops by 40%. Just a 2 to 2.5 degree increase in temperature in your balls leads to unhealthy sperm. So what's the normal temperature there?
Well, it's about 1.5 degrees lower than it should be in the abdomen if they were located there. That's why, for example, with cryptorchidism, when the testicle doesn't descend into the scrotum, it can shrivel up. If it remains in the abdomen for several years and is brought down too late, cancer can develop in that testicle 10 to 15 years later.
Yes, and by the way, that was also in this study, and it talked about how they brought down these testicles. One testicle was brought down with the Shamil operation. A friend of mine who's studying medicine recently mentioned this. He was at a surgery and assisted with the operation.
Do you know what the Kitli-Turak Herzen operation is called? That's the most common one.
To sum up, we have a temperature in our testicles of about 35 degrees Celsius, while the body temperature is 36.5 degrees Celsius. And if we increase the temperature in the testicles, we get a decrease in testosterone. This is not shown in all studies, only in some. After your testicles are exposed to higher temperatures in Celsius for a while, testosterone levels drop. This takes time and isn't immediate. And our testicles are not just hanging down from the body for no reason. They are specifically supposed to be a bit cooler compared to the rest of the body. And if we constantly wear tight underwear, which can even get stolen at the gym, then the temperature in our testicles will simply be permanently higher than it should be. As our grandmothers, mothers, and aunts taught us, we first put on underwear, then warm tights, followed by warm pants. In winter, to avoid getting cold, you come home, remove just your pants, and stay in thick tights and underwear. This continues for years. And as a result, when you grow up, your balls don't work as well as they should.
Remember, I said if you abstain for a short time, like 4 hours, your sperm quality improves. This isn't a myth. There's a study from March 2023. See, here it is. They compared the classic method and the 4-hour method, and they got an improvement in quality, specifically the quality of the ejaculate.
It depends on the men, their lifestyle, diet, and physical activity.
It's not specified. I haven't looked into it. But mainly they became more motile, meaning the motility of the sperm increased. And that's one way. I'm not saying that's how you should have sex, but when you need in vitro fertilization, according to this data, it's better to provide the ejaculate for in vitro fertilization after a 4-hour abstinence because it will be more concentrated. You don't need that much for in vitro fertilization since doctors handle collection and implantation themselves. You need the maximum number of healthy ones, with a low fragmentation rate and as motile as possible. This is especially interesting for in vitro fertilization, and few people, even reproductive specialists, are aware of it. It's better to do it after a 4-hour abstinence, meaning you ejaculate, then say, go and give the sample. I read this for the first time last night while I was preparing, but it seems very reasonable, interesting, and here's the study. Please go ahead and read it.
Most likely, it's because right after ejaculation, the process of spermatogenesis starts immediately. And these are fresh ones, fresh guys.
The connection with physical activity. You've heard, right, that many athletes abstain before training.
And
to be honest, we concluded that efficiency may drop, free testosterone might decrease, or prolactin could increase. But this study, by the way, is quite recent. It's from September 2022. Rebecca Brooks and Gerald Zavorsky. They showed this on a fairly large group of people, 133 individuals. What if there was sex before the competition, from 30 minutes to a day? Does it make any difference? So they gave them the same load, then next time they checked from 30 minutes to an hour, meaning they had sex, and there was no difference. Why? I found this interesting study in an interview with Cristiano Ronaldo, remember? I mentioned him before. He always has sex before training or before an important match, and then he shows better results. For him, it's like a ritual. But I didn't see any scientific evidence for this. I mean, performance. Their productivity didn't improve at all, not even by 1%. What do you think?
It's his subjective feeling. The person is living his best possible life. He has the best food, the best nutritionist, the best woman or women, the best car, the best housing.
I respect him. I'm not hating. I'm actually subscribed. I'm one of his followers.
I don't follow football at all. I'm not a fan. I just understand that he's one of the greatest. And everything in his life is perfect. And the fact that he has sex before his matches, well, he just enjoys it. Everything else in his life is great. And I'm sure that truly happy people don't engage in masturbation. I'm sure that happy people don't imitate the pleasure of life. They just take life, do something in it, work hard, and get real useful results.
That's all that's interesting. There was a study conducted on Chinese sailors that showed the longer the sexual abstinence, the stronger it is. For them, working conditions and the quality of their environment are important. And that's why they're now thinking about how to fix this situation. Because this factor of lack of sex has a strong impact on safety on the ship, on the quality of work, and on how satisfied they are. They often go on strike, so to speak, and I don't know the essence of the research. I mean, they don't explain it there, but it feels like they want to create some kind of position on the ship so that it would be officially allowed to satisfy their needs. Let's say, so that people would be happy and wouldn't write complaints anywhere that they're underpaid or that everything is bad. What do you think? So people who don't have regular sex or masturbation, because I'm sure there's masturbation there, that doesn't compensate. You see, that's what I'm getting at. Masturbation doesn't compensate for it. The fact that they're happy, just like in any other profession, in isolation, where there's a woman, a steady partner, the conditions are better. In other words, masturbation doesn't compensate for it. And maybe it's the same in our society. So if you don't have a woman, if you don't have regular sex with a girl you love, if you're not in a relationship, you'll be dissatisfied with everything around you. Those bitter people who sometimes write things in the comments are usually lonely people who have no one. They're angry at the world, nothing satisfies them, they're unhappy. So it turns out, really, another confirmation that masturbation doesn't give you the same thing. Even if you ignore hormone levels, stagnation and all that, here's a simple confirmation. For sailors, masturbation doesn't change how satisfied they are with their work.
That's why it starts like this for them. These toxic people might first steal underwear, then they engage in rough masturbation.
Toxic masturbation starts if the listener opposes masturbation but works shifts there. Maybe there are some practical ways to help him feel better, so that he doesn't experience these health problems when he returns, for example.
What health problems could he have when he returns?
Well, he's on the ship, arguing with everyone annoys him, everyone's fighting, he threw a plate at someone.
First, you need to understand the importance of sexual activity in your life. If you really understand the importance of abstaining from masturbation, pointless, unnecessary arousals, what I call pointless arousals, and pornography, then of course the load on your nervous system decreases. You understand what you're doing, or why you're not doing it right now, and what it's all for. As soon as your father tells you, when you're little, your father tells you, wait, I'll come in the evening, you'll see, and he leaves and you're left alone, you don't understand, I'm waiting. You worry, imagine bad scenarios and your cortisol rises. But it's different when your father says, wait, today I'll buy you that toy car you showed me yesterday. I'll make time, spend the money, go get it even though it's far. Stay home and wait. I'll bring it this evening. You know exactly why your father left, what he's going to buy you, and what emotions you'll feel when he comes back. What you're going to do with this toy, with this car, everything is clear, and you don't have any stress on your nervous system.
You made some video where you said that it's not enough just to not masturbate, but you also shouldn't get aroused, like watching for nothing, just to the end, and that's what should be done.
If sex isn't expected.
And there, I read a comment where someone wrote, all of this is nonsense. If there was no sex, then it doesn't matter whether you got aroused or not. It's all the same. It's unscientific and so on. That's why we're looking for a scientific article to confirm this. October 2022. Serkan Akan is Turkish, I think. The effect of arousal on sperm parameters. Seems like there are enough people to check this. 100 people ages 18 to 45. That's exactly our subscribers. Mine are a bit older. Yours are a bit younger. And there were two groups, actually not even two groups, everyone did it. So they were checked once after 3 days of abstinence, meaning they just abstained. Sperm count, quality and motility were examined after ejaculation. And the second time, for 3 days, they watched porn videos for half an hour each day. And then, not right after the porn, but in the same routine, the next day they ejaculated and the quality of the sperm was examined. So, the number of them didn't change, but the amount of ejaculate did. Why? Because the processes that signal that sex is about to happen, they trigger a series of neuroendocrinological processes. The gland starts to prepare, it begins to secrete fluid, and that's why, when everyone thinks that if there was no ejaculation, nothing has changed, things actually do change. So, if the gland starts filling its ducts with fluid and there's no release, what happens is we get a bit of congestion. because the fluid is partially absorbed, partially breaks down, and causes autoimmune inflammation. That's why sometimes people who practice abstinence incorrectly develop congestive prostatitis. Regarding abstinence, from your point of view, what are the contraindications to abstinence? That's the first question. And the second is, how should one practice abstinence correctly?
Let me answer the second question first. Proper abstinence is when you only get aroused when you're about to have sex. If you see a sexually attractive woman on the street, your thought in your head should immediately be the following. Will I have sex with her today or not? If yes, I understand. I feel it with my whole being that I'll approach her, I'll introduce myself, I'll make it happen and have sex. Today she'll be crazy about me just like I'm crazy about her right now because she's really very sexy and beautiful. Then you can enjoy her body, imagine whatever you want in your head because you'll approach her and make it happen. She'll like you enough. And if you have the thought in your head that, damn, she's just incredibly sexy, but I won't approach her. She doesn't meet guys like me, maybe she has someone and I'm in a hurry. I'm not in shape or dressed well today and so on. In that case, it's better not to get excited and just tell yourself next time that's when I'll do it. If I feel like I'm going to approach her or someone like her, then I'll look at her and get excited because I'll take things all the way to sex.
There would be a really funny insert here. You know which one? There was a movie with Jim Carrey, Liar Liar, and when people asked him questions, he couldn't lie, so he plugged his ears, went la la la, and ran into work to avoid hearing others' questions. Like when you go outside to places like Patriarch's Ponds, everyone is dressed up as if they're going to a ball, just watching each other.
Look, I'm not a Muslim, but in this regard, Islam works very well. Women there, as we know, are all covered, and that's a very good thing in terms of men not getting aroused for no reason. We're putting all the responsibility on women, which I don't support, though it's a step forward. But a man should again understand the importance of sexual activity in life, the importance of abstinence in his life, and the significance of pointless arousal. Once he figures out these three things, then when he goes outside and sees a bunch of beautiful girls without bras, in short skirts and so on, he understands that yes, I don't want to deal with the negative consequences I'll get if I get aroused right now. 20 times at this bus stop, 15 times in the supermarket line, and countless times at the fitness club when I see attractive women there. And I don't choose that life, I choose the life of a man who, if he approaches a woman and starts drooling over her, he does it expecting that today he'll take things all the way to sex. That's what I liked.
Actually, this isn't total abstinence as many assume. People often think it means you shouldn't even look at or think about the fridge unless you're going to eat.
Well said, I never thought about it that way.
It's time to eat. Go eat instead of wandering around staring at the container and thinking you can't afford it, or standing at the counter.
Yes, eating or getting aroused 10-15 times a day can lead to insulin resistance or diabetes, and nothing good comes from it.
A question about acupuncture and sadhu boards in general. Look, PubMed, again, I'm on your side here. Don't think otherwise. I won't criticize you in this regard. But I know...
What should have been done?
No, that's not needed. We should seek the truth, not criticize. I searched, but I haven't tried standing on those boards myself. I'm unsure if it works or not, but I'll try it. I should have taken it, but for example, I use the Kuznetsov applicator at home. Well, obviously it's nonsense, and when you take it off, and many guys I know, like Borya Ushakov, for example, also stand on them. Many say I'm showing unscientific nonsense. I even asked a neurologist who said it doesn't work. I decided to look into it because I don't really have any experience, especially clinical experience, so I decided to read what people write about it. PubMed, Sadhu nail boards, 0 publications in 10 years, Sadhu board, 0, acupressure, foot med, 0, acupressure, just foot, 20 studies in 10 years. That's all I found, but they're interesting and they actually confirm that it works. The first study, I'll show them directly because these topics are so debatable, so people will think less about whether it's true or not. All the studies we refer to we're presenting today. We're showing a 2017 study that shows that indeed acupuncture helps 3 times a week for 15 minutes. I think they did this with caregivers. And chronic, what's important, chronic lower back pain improves, and not just temporarily, but on a permanent basis. It's important that it didn't just relieve an acute condition, but that chronic pain goes away, and it really shows that all of this works. The second study, the second one, measured blood flow in people with impaired innervation, with occlusive diseases. This study isn't very recent, it's from 2007. There were several groups, and they showed that blood flow improves. And this is not a systemic reaction. So nothing is done to the right leg, but for the left, we either use needles or stand on a mat, which improves blood flow. And B, partial oxygen pressure, that is the saturation of blood and tissues with oxygen, also improves. If it were both legs, we would probably say that it's just psycho-emotional and we just feel good because of the pain, because of the opioids, but then why not both legs? So it works locally. So in a specific leg, blood flow and oxygen saturation in the tissues both improve. Turns out what you're doing isn't scientific. For now, explain how to do it right and what you gain, and I'll look for something else interesting.
Yeah, look, I stood on the nails for the first time. It's called 15s, meaning the distance between the nails is 15 millimeters, and the smaller the distance, the easier it is to stand. The standard is 8 or 10 millimeters between the nails, which most people use. It was the first time in my life I stood on 15 millimeters, and it was insanely painful. It was hellish pain that I experienced for the first time in my life. I broke this arm myself twice. The first time I broke it, I fell from almost the second floor, and that was my first fracture ever. My whole wrist was broken. The bone was zigzag shaped. I looked at it and didn't understand what a fracture was. It didn't hurt yet, so I started to set it back with my knee. I straightened the fracture with my knee, and I was about
Straightening it
I straightened it, and then the terrible pain began.
to the point of nausea.
My head was spinning. I was completely pale. All the blood drained from my body, and in the end I came home and it started swelling badly, and it hurt so much that I almost went crazy. That was my first fracture, Alexander, and it was only about 10% of what I went through later. I stood on 15mm nails, screamed, and shared the video on my social media. A few months later, my friend Marat said I got new 18mm nails. He said, come on, let's stand on them, and he did it, showed me. I thought, whew, damn. It looks harder than the 15mm ones I stood on the 18mm nails. I realized 15mm is just half of what I'm feeling. God, this is absolute hell. I can't do anything. Everything hurts. I want to get off, cry, and never do this again. But I stood through it. This is also on social media. A couple of months later, my friend told me, listen, you're stronger than I thought. I ordered new nails, but they didn't want to make them for me with 22mm between the nails. No one in history may have ever stood on 22. I couldn't find any proof of this, not a single video, not a single photo, not a single story from anyone. And so we stand on 22 ms and that's it. I doubt I'll ever feel more pain than this. That was everything. I have no words left. My language fails me here. I don't know what to say. This is the most painful thing in my life, and I give the nails the meaning of whether I can or can't do it. It's just rough for me. Can I do it or not? This pain is the anticipation of pain that's stronger than me, stronger than my core, my backbone, or maybe I'm stronger after all.
How do you feel when you get off them?
I feel immense relief. First of all, pride in myself and relief throughout my whole body. And there's a point here. There have been studies, I don't know, maybe you found one of them on PubMed or not. When you stand up, look. Let's take ancient times. Most of humanity used to run mostly barefoot. And if you injured your feet or one foot with something, most likely you couldn't hunt properly, you couldn't really save your own. In life, you become a burden, lowering your survival and your group's chances. If your wound doesn't heal, they'll likely abandon you. And we have a brain. Now, when we get some kind of injury on our feet, it sends huge impulses of signals to our immune system organs, telling them it's time to produce a large number of immune active cells that need to go there to the feet and heal the wound. That probably reduces our survival in this world. And when you step on nails, the brain receives these signals and sends them to the immune system organs. And your thymus starts producing so many immune active cells like it never did before, and the body tries to survive. Plus, there's a whole hormonal mix boiling inside, and as a result, these immune active cells travel through your bloodstream to your feet, to the place where it hurts really, really badly. Likely there's a cut there, lowering our survival chances, and they don't know what to do. There are no cuts, so why are we here? What's happening? And some of them start to disappear, get destroyed. It's chemistry, biochemistry. They start to change into another form, get neutralized, and some of them start running all over the circulatory system, further and everywhere, as if filling it up. They patched up these holes a bit here, reduced the inflammation here, back and forth, back and forth. As a result, you become healthier when you get off these nails, or even while you're still standing on them, you already become healthier than you were before. So, I give importance to whether I am stronger or they are, but there is also a physiological side, a biochemical one. Our immune system starts working at full capacity.
Let's talk science now. Let's look. Patients who underwent hemodialysis were tested. Well, acupressure, basically, it's not acupuncture. That's exactly why I found this term. It's specifically pressure applied with something sharp, so it's not acupuncture. These are those mats with needles. That's what they're called now. What did it do? Patients' sleep quality improved. The duration of sleep increased. The depth of sleep improved. The dose of sleeping pills they needed decreased. And their overall well-being got better. This occurred in just the first 4 weeks of regular study. The second study, conducted in 2022 on people with multiple sclerosis, is quite a large study and it's randomized. What did it show? Let me see here. The main point highlighted was the quality of life, the onset of multiple sclerosis, and the symptoms of the disease, meaning also in cases of multiple sclerosis. So this is a systemic disease, and it's not just in the legs, it's systemic. So you're not only working locally, the things we saw, like local changes in blood flow and saturation, but we can also influence systemic processes. This concerns the fact that these acute phase proteins, what is released, for example, when there seems to be some kind of injury somewhere, it doesn't just disappear into nowhere. Third, in patients with arterial hypertension, it decreased. This is a study from 2020. Pukatrochin came up with something, I don't know who that is. Systolic pressure, diastolic pressure, and pulse decrease in hypertensive patients. But there is a limitation here though. The study only reached stage 2B at most, but it has been proven that blood pressure and pulse decrease. So this is possible, including calming the nervous system. What should seem stimulating actually may have a calming effect on the central nervous system. So in the moment it hurts, but then you relax. And there's also a study, I think it's a Chinese study from 2017, that shows this also affects healing when you sprain your ankle. Remember, the whole point of this process is to heal a wound that isn't actually there. But even though there's no real wound, the swelling of the injured tissue is present, and the healing happens faster. Where this is applied, from the scientific point of view, we've basically established the cause and effect relationships, in fact. Right now, we've just proven in simple terms through science that this isn't some kind of pseudoscientific nonsense, that it actually works. And I'm not even advocating for this technique. Last night, I read about all this and tried to figure it out without taking sides or being biased. Few studies exist, but what I found points more to yes than no. So, well, my opinion as a doctor is practice, check it out, watch Shakir's videos. He explains how to do it right, and he has some other useful stuff in different areas. He's not just about nails, he also talks about nutrition, and in general, he'll tell you a lot of useful things too. Many ask why I invite you, David, or do live streams with the guys. You do good things and aim to help people.
Yes, to ease their suffering.
Yes, they say, but they're selling something. I don't see anything wrong with selling products that are aimed at helping people. Any work should be paid for.
Paid materials, they calm people down.
Yes, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. So if someone says something to you in that regard, it's all nonsense. No one will thank you, even if you're doing a good thing. People tell me, but you don't have an education. Well, I know a bunch of doctors who have a stack of diplomas this thick, but they don't keep up with things. They got them 30 years ago and stopped developing themselves. But if a person is developing, has a positive attitude, and wants to change people for the better, I'm all for it, so God bless you and your friend with health to keep developing. If I can be of any help, I'm always here. Thank you.
The phrase no education sounds harsh, like you never went beyond school.
Cigano?
Here's a seam in the back, my close friend. We don't have higher medical education. We studied at the same institution. It was called, what was that cafe called? Brat. Anyway, it's the Volga region. It's the Volga State Academy of Physical Culture, Sports and Tourism. And do you remember how anatomy was, how unbearably difficult it was? Then he left and I stayed, and we also had physiology, we had biochemistry, and all of it was crazy. Studying and passing exams on this is tough, but the basic info is there, otherwise I wouldn't be discussing it. So we've covered nails, we've covered abstinence. Let me say,
Yes.
cold treatments are more beneficial than not.
And they ask us, because they say, do you eat the same way? I don't eat breakfast. I used to, but my breakfast was almost never carbs. It was always a protein and fat breakfast.
Was it eggs?
Mostly omelets with eggs. Dairy, in the end, I removed that from my diet. That's what I came to. I cut out breakfast and lunch. I'm doing intermittent fasting 18/6. That's my protocol now.
From what time to what time?
Well, because I operate. If I do it in the morning, I'll just die of hunger in a week because I'll stop eating. Since when I'm supposed to eat, I'm operating, so I have no choice. Of course, if I had a job that allowed it, maybe it would be from morning until afternoon, or at the time when I'm most active, daytime, not morning, probably afternoon, but evening is absolutely fine. I could eat from 6 to 12, but in reality, I actually eat somewhere from 6 to 9 or 10. I usually eat 2 meals a day, not 6 or 7. Honestly, my eating habits aren't ideal or optimal.
Honestly, sorry, I interrupted you. Does eating several times a day cause insulin resistance?
Well, opinions differ here, like a lot of insulin is released. First of all, insulin is always released in different amounts. Why do we need insulin? Basically, it's a mechanism that lets glucose into the cell, and even for a tiny little bit, there won't be a huge amount of insulin released. If it's constantly a large amount of carbohydrates, for example, although insulin is released not only for carbohydrates, but even for protein and in large amounts of insulin. This will lead to insulin resistance, but if you are physically active, if you consume less, the likelihood is lower. But if you already have insulin resistance, then you definitely need to eat less frequently, as rarely as possible. That's why, when I see overweight people being put on meals from containers every 2-3 hours, with frequent small meals, I followed those recommendations when I was 25 years old. Basically, I had that level of knowledge when I realized that you shouldn't do it that way, that it's better to eat less often. Why does the stomach shrink? After thinking all day about evening meals, after a week, they can't eat as much anymore. They learn to treat food differently and avoid snacking since it's not allowed during the day. Third, their hormones get better. Fourth, it's also a detox because you're not putting new food into your body and your body is focused on letting the kidneys filter the blood, the liver filters the blood. Nothing new comes in, the old stuff gets eliminated. That's why your creatinine and nitrogenous waste levels are lower. When people mention detox programs, the best approach is to avoid harming your organs and let them function naturally. How do you practice intermittent fasting? What advice would you give? Tell us about your own experience.
Here's what I do. No matter what time I wake up, whether it's 5, 6, 7, or 8, I try not to eat anything for about 5-6 hours after I wake up. And usually it turns out that I eat at 11 a.m. if I woke up really early, but most often I eat between 12 and 4 p.m. That's my first meal in this window. Asim can confirm it. He and I work out at the gym around 10 or 11. We start on an empty stomach, and after the workout we go or drive to wherever we're going to eat. So by that time it's about 2 or 3 post-meridium, sometimes 1 post-meridium, and my second meal is usually between 7 and 9 post-meridium. So I have 2 small windows like that, and that's when I eat. And I can compare this to when I actually used to have breakfast. After you have breakfast, and God forbid it's a carb-heavy breakfast or a heavy breakfast, you don't feel like doing anything afterwards. You just want to lie down, sit, be passive, and so on. And I think that's when these conversations started. Work out only 2-3 hours after breakfast, making sure you're hungry for at least 2 hours before exercising. Don't exercise immediately after eating. Of course, having a full stomach and so on matters, but still, your hormonal system changes when you eat. Correct me if I'm wrong. I talked to several doctors, candidates of science, and a doctor of science. I told them this and asked them to correct me, but they didn't. They said that's exactly how it is. I want to do the same with you. We're hungry, the hunger hormone ghrelin rises, we feel hungry, ghrelin stimulates our hypothalamus to send signals to the anterior pituitary gland to increase the production of growth hormone. I think that's the short version. Growth hormone starts to enter the bloodstream from the anterior pituitary gland and also reaches the liver. In the liver, it activates somatotropin receptors, which start signaling to increase the production of insulin-like growth factor 1 or insulin-like growth factor, another one of our powerful anabolic hormones in bone tissue and in the liver, where it is produced. After that, after adolescence, due to the synergy of growth hormone and dihydrotestosterone, our dihydrotestosterone levels start to rise, and after dihydrotestosterone, our dopamine levels increase, and after dopamine, acetylcholine rises as well. So there is a kind of chemical synergistic connection there. During hunger, we feel active, on the move, we don't want to sit around or scroll through our phones, our mind becomes clearer, and we have more energy. It doesn't just last a short time, it can go on for hours. Once you're used to it, it's easier, but at first it's hard and withdrawal symptoms are inevitable. And right when we start eating in this state of hunger, our leptin increases, insulin increases, and leptin starts to decrease insulin-like growth factor 1 synthesis. After insulin-like growth factor, 1 growth hormone starts to drop. After growth hormone, dihydrotestosterone drops. After dihydrotestosterone, dopamine drops. And after dopamine, acetylcholine drops. Insulin doesn't suppress insulin-like growth factor 1 in any way. On the contrary, insulin has a good effect on insulin-like growth factor 1. But here we have leptin, which appears when we eat, and it turns out that during meals, insulin rises. Why do we need another anabolic hormone? Well, so that the building materials get into the cell, and as a result, when you're hungry, you're active, you're full of energy. It makes sense since our ancestors became active when hungry to find food. In other words, they woke up. Imagine our ancestors would get up half an hour to an hour after sunrise. They lived in open areas, not in apartments with heating, plastic windows, and so on. Sun rises in about an hour, they get up, they're hungry, there's no food, no canned goods, no food, no way to salt or dry food, and so on. They learned to do that 6,000 to 8,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. Before that, at least according to current historical data, there is no evidence that 15,000 to 40,000 years ago we knew how to preserve food. That could spoil quickly. So our ancestors, if we take most of human history, not just the last 10,000 years, but the majority of it, our ancestors would wake up hungry, and their task was to stop being hungry. They had to hunt, gather, or take food. I saw an experiment with rats where they created a rat camp. Each rat chose its own role in that society, and there were several roles. As a rule, 2 rats did this experiment several times in different places with different rats. There were 2 rats that took food away from that one poor rat who worked hard, gathered the food and carried it home. They would meet her like 2 thugs, beat her up and take her food, and this happened day after day. So you can hunt, gather, or simply take food from those who have already done the first or the second for you. A scavenger. Scavenging is dangerous and infection often leads to death. Turns out our ancestors not only searched for food from early morning but also had to avoid becoming prey themselves. Alexander, just imagine how hard that is. Most people can't even picture it.
That's why physical activity was higher, either running from or after food. Plus the paleo diet, because it's as close as possible to the kind of nutrition people had before. And teeth. Just appearance-wise, have you had your wisdom teeth out? Yes, I haven't. I still need one removed. Unfortunately, I was supposed to do it yesterday, but I didn't because of the podcast. I thought I'd just tough it out. Me too. I read a study that said the dental arches in all fossil skulls, which are hundreds or thousands of years old, are much better than they are now. They didn't have these wisdom teeth, which are now called wisdom teeth. But in fact, these are the teeth we used to use. The dental arch used to be wider, and the mouth was bigger.
Yes, the dental arch was bigger.
because we used it actively, and in fact we just started chewing less, eating less. The food is softer, more convenient. You don't have to gnaw at your food anymore. And our teeth started to change, and that's why the way people see humans in the future, we won't have any ribs left at all, and our muscles will gradually disappear. Because with each generation we'll have to use them less and less. We'll have a very small mouth, and exactly those people who
Like aliens.
have a sculpted skull, minimal muscles, and a small mouth. Maybe we'll reach that point someday. Regarding growth hormone and the concept of somatopause, it actually occurs quite early in humans. There are peak periods when our bone skeleton is forming while we are growing, and the levels of somatotropin, the growth hormone, differ greatly in elderly people during puberty, pre-puberty, and at different periods of life. For example, the first peak of sex hormones occurs during the prenatal period, and the second peak happens when we are already practically born. Then, at certain ages during our development, if I remember correctly, at 3 years, 7 years, and then later, the classic puberty occurs, which we are used to thinking and talking about. This is when we are 12, 13, or 14 years old, when facial hair starts to grow, when acne appears. The somatotropic hormone, in principle, quickly goes into a pause. And yes, the connection you described is there, at least partially, but the numbers aren't quite as pronounced.
We're talking about large numbers.
Somatotropin hormone levels at night reach that point for most people by age 22-24. Usually people get it tested either to detect some kind of dwarfism, that's usually why they do it, or to check if the growth hormone is working. 99% of people who test somatotropin hormone are checking if the hormone is working. But in reality, the physiological levels drop pretty quickly and are already at the lower end of the reference range. Probably from age 23 to 24, it's low, but not zero. Why is this diet called anti-aging? Indeed, if you eat rarely, if you make your body release less insulin and less often, with fewer insulin spikes, you age more slowly, you look better. Your mTOR kinase starts working properly, and you become more focused. People avoid discussing autophagy, thinking it starts later, but cellular mechanisms operate differently. And you really will look better, you'll look younger. That's why overweight people die faster, they get sick more often. Even without comfort, this diet works. First and foremost, it's about longevity, about reducing the risk of developing cancer, about looking good, and about having healthier, better hormone levels and more energy. Yes, I'm all for it. I was just recently asked, and Shakir said, well, I eat the same way and I'm all for it. For what? You skip breakfast, but now they'll twist it and tell everyone to skip breakfast. If you have gastrointestinal problems like gallstone disease, if you have Gilbert's syndrome, if you have a duodenal ulcer, there are many contraindications. Such a nutrition protocol can't be suitable for everyone, just like any other, and it shouldn't be. There's television nutrition. If your gallbladder has been removed and you have post-cholecystectomy syndrome, you need to eat often. This approach isn't right for everyone, so it's important to consult a doctor before choosing this nutrition protocol.
Is it absolutely necessary? That question shouldn't even be asked. Of course, you should go and at least check the condition of your gallbladder, see if you have any stagnation, any bends or any stones, and after that, you try skipping breakfast for at least the first 2 or 3 hours after you wake up, and you get used to it.
Ease into it gradually. That's where you began.
You can't take a cold shower or swim in the epiphany frost right away if you've never tried hardening yourself at home first. Everything takes gradual steps.
Work out enough so you can get up the next day.
And you couldn't. Do you remember your first workout, how you felt after your first workout at the gym?
I remember how I felt when I was on crutches for 3 months and then went to the gym to work out. Everything hurt, even though I had already forgotten what muscle pain felt like.
Yes, it's extremely painful because we often act foolishly, that's right. I hadn't worked out for a long time back then, so I thought, now I'll train really hard. I missed it so much and you work out intensely, but for the next 2 days or even longer, you can't move properly.
Do you and your friend go to the banya, sauna or hammam together? And David asked me to publicly ask you,
What a surprise. Thank you, David.
He says it's strictly forbidden to go into the cold or heat after workouts.
But we discussed this with everyone. You know what he says, David? I'll say it to your face. We're going to mess with you right here. He thinks that this is a continuation of the workout, not even a continuation. It's like a second workout.
It's additional stress?
Yeah, additional, I mean, you first get stressed during the workout, right? And then you go to a cold shower or a sauna, let's say sauna, not cold shower, and you get another hyper stress. And in that case, you can develop adrenal insufficiency. It's just too much. You produce too many stress hormones. You just can't handle it. I find this position weak for some reason. And if you train hard in the gym, after that, your parasympathetic system kicks in right away. You're still energized. You can leave for 15 minutes and return to the gym to keep working out since you're still in that rhythm. But as soon as you finish your workout and go into the locker room, take off your underwear, make sure no one steals them, and go to the shower stall, you turn on the cold water and start from the bottom up. You know why, right? I always suggest taking a contrast cold shower from the bottom up. It's for your lymphatic system. Do it that way. A cold shower is a continuation of your workout. For your central nervous system, for your cardiovascular system, for your brain, it's a continuation of your training. And as a result, it helps reduce inflammation in your muscle fibers, which speeds up muscle recovery. And it also thoroughly cleanses your lymph because it forces it to move from the bottom up through all the chains of lymph nodes, get purified in the skull, mix in a crystal clear form with our blood, and nourish the brain. In other words, it allows the lymphatic system to perform its functions. As a result, after a cold shower following a workout, you feel much more energetic and alive than without it. And you won't get adrenal insufficiency, or what's also called adrenal fatigue syndrome, which is disputed by medicine. It's not entirely accurate. I don't think you can actually get that. So this position of David, I consider it weak. It's not quite the Spartan mentality that should be present in Permat's life.
Check out the 2022 study I found while you were talking. They used magnetic resonance imaging to examine tissue changes. Cryotherapy was used only on the legs post-workout and studied regularly. Regular cryotherapy sessions for 15 minutes, according to magnetic resonance imaging data, showed good changes and reduced inflammation as well as improved recovery. So there really is a positive effect, because there are big debates about whether the improvements are due to us feeling better psychologically, or if it's really because inflammation factors like swelling are reduced, or maybe it's because training the blood vessels improves lymph flow. Neurologist Epifanov put it very well. I'll say it that way. I said, listen, this study says in the paper that it doesn't work, so why the hell are you using it? He says, of course. I ask why, if it's written there. He says, yeah, I don't care what's written. If in the official source it says it doesn't work, but in my practice it shows that it does work. I really don't care what official medicine thinks. I'm ready to use unofficial methods. That's why I tried today to get you to share your opinion, and together we tried to find confirmation or refutation. But I didn't have any specific goal. So people don't think we skipped a detailed discussion. I only mentioned the direction. I genuinely searched for the truth, not to confirm or refute anything, and it seems to me this is what the truth is. That many things that seem pseudoscientific to us actually have quite reasonable, logical, and well-researched explanations. Effectiveness. If you look hard enough, you can likely find studies on any topic claiming it doesn't work. That's why it's very important that this paper confirmation also has clinical confirmation. And if people want to try something, they should see if it works for them, because not everything works for everyone. The key is to do it gradually and wisely, not hastily. Like yesterday, you were overeating from morning till night, and today you suddenly started fasting and then ended up with digestive problems. For example, you'd never poured cold water on yourself before, but today you did it for 15 to 20 minutes.
I actually saw messages from people who said, I watched your video about the benefits of cold showers. This morning I took a cold shower for 10 minutes and I feel really bad. I'm freezing, I have a headache and so on. 10 minutes of an ice cold shower. Who would do that? I suggest a cold shower for no more than 2 minutes, ideally 1.5, starting from the bottom up. Once you reach your head, again, cool your gonads a little bit more and that's it. After that, you're done.
Tell me, Please, what advice would you give to guys who follow people who are their idols, their fans, those they look up to in terms of a healthy lifestyle, healthy eating? What advice would you give? People often look up to 5, 6, or even 10 others, and usually each says something different. Sometimes they get confused, wondering who to trust, and sometimes these people completely disagree with each other about certain things. So, how not to get lost? What advice would you give to the guys?
Everyone experiences situations like this. The most important thing here is to try it yourself a few times, meaning to systematically bring some practice into your life. For example, someone says you should take cold showers, someone else says no, you should pour a bucket of water over yourself from top to bottom. That's what people often say to do, so you try pouring cold water over yourself from top to bottom for 5 days. And then you're like, okay, but another person says you should do it from bottom to top with cold water. Try doing it from bottom to top, try it for 5 days, and then you're like, so my feelings, you can even write them down, take notes, and now you have all your impressions. For me, everything is clear. I want either the first or the second option. I feel better after the first or after the second. And you need to do exactly the same thing with everything. Changing your nutrition protocol, organizing your physical activity during the day, walking, running, workouts, martial arts, and so on. Or it could be your sleep schedule. What time is best to fall asleep and what time is best to wake up? You try it this way and that way and another way, and you test it on yourself. So the most important thing here is to try, because I can't give a better answer. We have to test something on ourselves to understand whether it works for us or not. And when you've tried something and realized, yes, this is great, I want to keep doing it, good job, keep going. If you realize you don't want to continue, thank God I'm done with this, then remove it from your life. And now you know for sure that it doesn't suit you. The key here is that it doesn't suit you. That's it.
I think it's a podcast, but it's not really a podcast. We just had a chat and discussed some interesting topics. I think there was quite a lot of useful information, and it was useful both for me and for you, because unfortunately we learn something new every day, sometimes with regret because we only found out about it today, and sometimes with joy because it confirms what we're doing, and we hadn't found it before. All the studies we're discussing are from 2022 or 2023. They're recent, and I didn't mention anything old today. Some people have poured cold water on themselves for 20 years, done interval training for 20 years, or stood on nails for 40 years. And back then, when there was no scientific evidence, as I think Tinkoff said, I don't care. That's how I feel. I just wish there was more science, so that what we feel would have an explanation and we could find the most optimal way to become healthier.
Absolutely. Happiness, health, and less suffering in life, because we came into this life to live it as efficiently as possible. Each person decides what works best for them. That's all.
Shakir Babaev joined us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Alexander. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. See you soon.